So welcome everybody. Gracias, bienvenidos. This is a free webinar on DACA titled The Way Forward, What the SCOTUS Decision Means for Dreamers and Advocates. Bienvenidos a todos a este seminario sobre DACA, acción deferida para las llegadas de los niños y el camino que sigue la significativa decisión de la Corte Suprema. Vamos a ofrecer interpretación en español para este seminario y voy a introducir a Naira Pacheco, que va a compartir unas reglas e información sobre el acceso a este seminario.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Naira Pacheco Guzman, and I will be your interpreter from English to Spanish today. Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Naira Pacheco Guzmán y yo seré su intérprete de español a inglés. Esta sesión será interpretada simultáneamente, entonces siéntase libre de escuchar y de hablar en el idioma que se sienta más cómodo. Los participantes que no son completamente bilingües en ambos idiomas deben escoger un canal de idioma. This meeting will be interpreted simultaneously, so please feel free to speak and listen in the language you feel most comfortable in. Participants who are not fully bilingual should join a language channel. Todos podrán ver y oír a todos los demás, pero si seleccionan un canal de lenguaje, también van a poder escuchar al intérprete cuando alguien hable un idioma que usted no entiende. So everyone will be able to hear everyone else, but when you select a language channel, you'll be able to also hear the interpreter when there is a language spoken that you don't understand. Para poder usar la función de interpretación, usted tendrá que descargar la última versión de la aplicación de Zoom, ya sea en su celular o su computadora, para que pueda escuchar la interpretación completamente. Favor de asegurarse que tenga la versión más actualizada de la aplicación Zoom, y si no la tiene, favor de consultar el chat para ir al sitio de web de Zoom que hemos enviado. In order to be able to fully use the interpretation function, you must download the latest version of the Zoom app either on your phone or your computer so that you can hear the interpretation. Please ensure you have the latest version of the app now. If you do not, please go to the Zoom website we have shared on the chat. Creamos los espacios multilingües en conjunto, así que no hable demasiado rápido, sea consciente de la accesibilidad para todos, una sola persona a la vez. Si usted es bilingüe, por favor de no hablar o cambiar de idioma a mitad de la oración. A favor de desactivar su micrófono para que no haya ecos o ruido de fondo. También favor de hablar en un paso moderado y recuerde que se está realizando interpretación. Presentadores, favor de mantener en mente su velocidad, especialmente cuando están leyendo algo, ya que tendemos a hablar hasta más rápido al leer. We create multilingual spaces together, so please don't go too fast. Be mindful of accessibility for all, one person at a time speaking. If you are bilingual, please don't speak and switch back and forth from languages in mid-sentence. Please mute when you are not speaking so that there aren't any echoes or background noises. Please speak at a moderate pace and remember that interpretation is occurring. Presenters, please be mindful of your pace, especially when reading aloud, as we tend to speak even faster when we're reading. En un momento, cuando termine de dar las instrucciones, activaremos la función de interpretación. Si usted está en su computadora, va a ver aparecer un globo en la parte de abajo de su pantalla. Haga clic en ese icono del globo y seleccione el idioma que habla. Si usted es bilingüe, puede escoger audio original. Si está en su teléfono, va a ver 3 puntos en la parte de abajo a la derecha de su pantalla. Haga clic en Interpretación de idiomas y seleccione el idioma que habla. Si por algún motivo el audio original suena más fuerte que la voz del intérprete, en cualquier momento puede silenciar el audio original. In just a minute after I finish giving instructions, we will activate the interpretation feature. If you are on a computer, you will see a globe pop up in the bottom of the screen to the right. Click on the globe icon and select the language you speak. If you are bilingual, you can choose original audio. If you are on your phone, you will see 3 dots on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Click on those and click on language interpretation and select the language you speak. If for some reason the original speaker sounds louder than the interpreter you are listening to, you can mute the original audio at any moment. Gracias a todos. Ahora vamos a activar la función de interpretación. Thank you all. We will now activate the interpretation function.
Thank you, Naida. So I'm going to begin by introducing myself. My name is Jose Alamillo. I'm a professor in the Chicano Studies Department at Cal State Channel Islands here in Camarillo. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. And I want to first thank our sponsor, Buen Vecino, who's putting on this free webinar with other co-sponsors that I'd like to mention: LULAC of Conejo Valley, the Council on American-Islamic Relations, Adelante Comunidad Conejo, and Importa Santa Barbara. So why are we holding this webinar? Well, let me talk to you about our goals. First, to update the public about DACA. Second, to inform the public about the process of obtaining DACA. Third, educate about the political dimensions of DACA. And finally, to humanize DACA recipients. So if you have questions, please submit those questions under the Q&A button. So before we begin in introducing our panelists, I'd like to share with you some important notes. So for today, no legal advice will be provided through the webinar. We will discuss legal issues, but each individual must consult a qualified legal advisor for legal advice. Please do not share personal details in this webinar. Opinions expressed are the views of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the sponsoring organizations. Thanks for questions submitted in advance. We will address those before we get to the other questions that are submitted through Q&A. After the webinar, we'll send an email with all the contacts of the organizations that were mentioned, including the ones that I already mentioned. So for now, we're going to go ahead and then I'm going to invite the panelists to introduce themselves. First, let's begin with Amina Fields.
Hi, I'm an immigrant rights attorney at CARE, and we are located in Anaheim, and CARE is a nonprofit organization, and it's the biggest civil rights advocate for the Muslim community. We provide direct immigration legal representation and services to several counties in Southern California. Those counties include Orange, Riverside, Ventura, Los Angeles, and Kern, and many others. We have experience with DACA applicants by submitting applications, and we provided consultations to DACA recipients to assess whether they're eligible for any other immigration benefits. Other types of services that we provide include family-based applications, asylum applications, applications for victims of domestic violence, and representation in immigration court. Our organization provides free, confidential legal consultations over the phone. And I just wanted to thank Willie from Buen Vecino for coordinating this, and welcome everyone who is here to support the DACA community. I'm glad to see so many people registered for this webinar.
Next, we will proceed with Rafael.
Hi everyone, my name is Rafael Torres. I am a licensed attorney here in the state of California. My firm is located here in Simi Valley, and my practice mainly focuses on immigration law. I'm also the volunteer staff attorney for Buen Vecino, and I handle our pro bono legal docket. I'd like to echo Amina's statement about our sentiment of welcome, and it's great to see so many people interested in this important topic that affects so many people. So thank you.
And next, Jose Marichal.
Hi, I'm Jose Marichal. I am a political science professor at California Lutheran University. I teach and study about public policy and race, identity and politics. I've written about immigration issues, and I'm an observer of the political aspects of the immigration debate. And I'm also a member of LULAC Conejo Valley.
Thank you. Next, Marlene Flores.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marlene Flores, and I am the new executive director at Importa, and I'm also an accredited representative. Importa is a nonprofit organization that provides free legal services. We're not attorneys, we're accredited representatives, which were authorized by the Department of Justice. And we do a little bit of everything: DACA applications, permanent residency renewals, naturalizations. We also do consultations for U visas, VAWAs, family petition. So we have our Santa Barbara office, our Lompoc office, and our Santa Maria office. And I hope we get to answer all your questions today. Thanks.
And then next we have Maria Rodriguez.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Maria Rodriguez. I'm a recent graduate of California Lutheran University. I am also part of Buen Vecino. I focus on policy and legal work with them, and recently I became a fellow for the Social Justice Fund of Ventura County.
Thank you. Thank you. So for the first hour, we're going to proceed with a series of questions for the panelists. And then around 7:10, we're going to then switch to questions and answers. So let's first begin with, on June 18th, in a 5-4 vote, the US Supreme Court blocked Trump's administration's attempt to terminate DACA. And so many of you, I'm sure, have a response, and I'd like to ask you all to give me a brief response. I know in my college, a lot of my students, many of my DACA students were very happy, but I want to hear from your reaction to this decision. So, Amina, do you want to go ahead?
Well, I was surprised given that the makeup of the Supreme Court Justice. However, after reviewing the details of the decision, it does make sense that it went that way. And it's a great win for the DACA community, but it doesn't protect them because it lays out how the administration can legally revoke the DACA program. So that community, the DACA recipients are still at risk.
Thank you. Rafael, what was your immediate reaction when you heard the news from the Supreme Court?
My immediate reaction was one of joy. I was really happy to hear that the Supreme Court found, I believe appropriately, that the Trump administration had inappropriately tried to cancel the program. So that was great. But then, as Amina said, it is somewhat nerve-wracking to think about the fact that the decision lays out very clearly the appropriate way that the Trump administration can actually do it. So we're sort of on pins and needles at the moment to see what exactly the Trump administration and President Trump in particular will do.
Thank you. And Professor Marichal, what was your immediate reaction?
Yeah, definitely similar relief. I actually just started breaking down crying unexpectedly because I really had pretty much resigned myself to the fact that there was a part of DACA that focused more on conferring a benefit, so the work permit, that I thought, given a 5-4 conservative court, they were going to look at that and say, well, that really wasn't, you're going beyond what Congress has authorized you to do with the enforcement of immigration law, so we're going to strike this down. And it's curious in this decision that they didn't actually say that DACA couldn't be struck down. What they said was that the Trump administration is in violation of something called the Procedures Act of 1946, which says that if the executive branch, separate from the Congress, the lawmaking branch, if the executive branch issues an order, there's a process that they have to follow. They have to issue a justification. They have to allow for a comment period. There's a procedure that you have to follow, and what the 5-4 with Roberts and the 4 other justices that sided with him said was, you didn't follow the Administrative Procedures Act, but you have every right as the executive to issue an executive order. And just like the Obama administration issued DACA as an executive order, and we'll get at some point into the differences between the DREAM Act and DACA. So the executive branch has the authority to issue an order, an implementation of law. You have the same authority to undo the last president's authorization. So Obama created DACA. The Trump administration has the right to. They just didn't do it in a manner that was consistent with the Administrative Procedures Act. And so that's why the court gave basically like a narrow decision that says, okay, the next administration, or even this administration, if it wants to, although we can talk about the politics of why it may not, if it wants to, we can do it again. It just has to be consistent, just has to follow the protocols of the Administrative Procedures Act. And supposedly this court, 5-4, would say you're totally within your legal bounds to do that if you so choose.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And Marlene, what was the reaction in Santa Barbara?
Well, we were all super duper happy. We were all extremely jumping up and down. Now we're just sitting here trying to figure out what's really going to happen. What's the next step? Who can apply? So it's pretty much, we're happy for those that still have DACA and can renew their DACA. On the other hand, we're, still trying to figure everything else.
Yeah. Yes, and Maria, I know you're a DACA recipient. So could you share with us your personal response to this decision?
Sure. So, I've lived 3 years, it was, for the past 3 years has been a super traumatic experience because our life has literally been hanging by a thread, not knowing what was going to happen. So for me, it was very shocking that the Supreme Court decided that it stays in place for now. But at the same time, it's really worrisome because, the Trump administration can try and kill it, get rid of the program once again. So our lives is, the way I see it is that our lives are still in limbo. We don't know what's going to happen. And that's why it's really, really important that we push those who can vote to vote in November, because they are the ones who are going to make the difference, whether, the current president gets reelected or we get a new administration in November.
Thank you. Yes, so it was definitely a bittersweet response, and as many of you mentioned. So let's start with the first question that I have for Amina. What is DACA, and what benefits does a DACA recipient receive exactly?
Myself? Okay. So DACA was a policy implemented under the Obama administration on June 15, 2012. The policy announced that certain people who came to the United States as children and meet several guidelines may request consideration of deferred action for a period of 2 years and subjected to renewal. There are several requirements to be eligible for DACA. There's like about 7 general requirements, one of which is that the recipient must be under the age of 31 years old as the date of June 15, 2012. And the recipient must show that they came to the US before they turned 16 and they must show that they lived in the U.S. since June 15, 2017 and continuously be present in the U.S. from that date. They also had to be physically present on the date that the executive order was, or the memorandum was implemented. And they must have not had lawful status on that date as well. And the last two things is that they must show that they were enrolled in school or had completed school. And lastly, they must not have had any convictions of a felony or a misdemeanor or pose a threat to the U.S. So if you were granted DACA, you were given the benefit, the immigration benefit of getting an employment authorization, as well as advanced parole. And you were deferred from being deported during the time that your authorization was valid. And that was what was implemented in 2012. However, it has been limited since the Trump administration came into office.
Thank you. And Maria, this question is more for you as a DACA recipient. How did DACA affect your life when you got DACA? How did it change for you?
So DACA affected my life in positive and negative ways. I was able to receive a work permit, so I'm able to work legally. I'm protected from deportation. So negatively, I always knew that I was taking a risk by sharing my information with the federal agency, and I decided to take that risk because I knew that it's all or nothing at this point. So in the back of my mind, I always know that I'm always at risk no matter what, because I test my information, and if I do something wrong or something goes wrong, I test my information and they can deport me at any time. Yeah, so it has affected me positively, negatively these past few years that I've had DACA. And now more than ever, it is a little bit more frightening because, like I mentioned, the past 3 years have been very traumatic because we didn't know what was going to happen, what the Supreme Court was going to decide. So, even though it went in our favor, that still doesn't mean that, we're safe from any harm or risk.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that personal story, Maria. My next question is directed to Professor Marichal, and it has to do with the history of DACA. When and how did DACA come to being? And can you speak to the political compromises that led to the creation of DACA under President Obama, and the difference between an act of Congress and an executive action?
Okay, I'm going to try to be sensitive to the fact that we only have an hour, because we could probably spend 5, 6, 10, 20 hours talking about this. I think it's important there's two things we should start with. Number one, the last significant immigration law was passed by Reagan in 1986. In a climate where there was much less support for immigration. Why that happened is something that we have to sort of talk through. The other, and one of the big reasons it happened is that even though there was less support for immigration, it wasn't a very hot button identity issue, right? And so the business community at the time was very pro trying to get an amnesty. The last time we had an amnesty was 1986 during the Reagan administration. So the business community was pushing really hard, and so there wasn't a lot of political cost on either side because it wasn't a big deal issue at the time in 1986. I mean, there were people opposed to immigration, but it wasn't. We didn't have talk radio. We didn't have the ways. We didn't have the ability to polarize the issue the way we do now. I show my students a poll that was taken by the Pew Foundation in 1994 that shows that Republicans and Democrats pretty much had the same anti-immigrant sentiments. In other words, you couldn't tell the difference between a Republican and a Democrat in terms of their opposition to immigration. So even the election, that really didn't change through the Clinton administration. Clinton passed in 1996, Clinton signed an immigration reform bill that was really about increasing border enforcement. Right? So you really don't see much of a change between the two parties, even up until the election of Obama in 2008. So when Obama gets elected in 2008, he's elected into this context where immigration is reasonably unpopular, and there's a political, especially for red state senators who are Democrats. So a lot of Democrats who are in red states, to support immigration reform would be really difficult for them in their states. That carried on all the way through 2011, 2012. So what Obama did when he came into office is said, well, I'm going to increase border enforcement so that I can come to the table and get a comprehensive immigration reform showing that I'm tough on the border. Well, of course, immigration activists were like, they kind of went along with that for a while, but after a while they were like, what are you doing, right? So he got labeled by the National Council of La Raza president at the time, called him the deporter in chief, and that really stuck and that really stung him, right? But up until all the way through 2010, 2011, the Obama administration wasn't really acting on immigration reform. They were trying to get compromise, but they weren't. They were doing tough border enforcement with the hopes that the public would see him as being strong on the border. Let me back up for a second. The Bush administration tried to enact immigration reform, and Bush felt like right before he left office that this would be the thing that he could do to, win Latino voters to the Republican Party. He's a governor from Texas. He had a pretty good relationship with Latinos in Texas, and he couldn't hold a coalition. So Republicans defected, and a lot of Democrats, which is true at the time, in 2007 defected, and so Bush couldn't get comprehensive immigration reform. Obama didn't even try up until about 2010, 2011. They were trying to get, there was something called the Gang of Eight, Republican and Democratic senators were trying to work together to provide a comprehensive immigration reform. The DREAM Act, right? Trying to get a path to citizenship for all undocumented immigrants. The idea at the time was all of the people who are part of the immigrant rights community should stand firm and try to push for reform for everybody. And at some point, Dreamer activists said, you know what, we're never going to get anywhere if we keep going along this route. We're going to push for standalone action by the Obama administration. And so a number of Dreamer activist organizations said, we're going to pressure the Obama administration to act alone, to not necessarily wait for Congress to act, but to use the executive authority that the executive branch has, that the president has, to enforce immigration law. So even if there's no DREAM Act from Congress, the president can say, and I'm going to put them at the back of the line. So I'm basically going to deactivate enforcement against people who aren't really a threat to national security or to public safety. For the longest time, he held out and said, I can't do anything about this, right? Only Congress can. Curiously, he gave an event in California, and there was, how they put up people behind the president to make it look like diverse. And so there was one dreamer that they had put behind there. The dreamer decided, I'm going to speak out of turn. I'm going to basically confront the president and say, you have the power to do this. And he said, no, I don't. Actually, no, I really don't. But, over time, right, the president was forced by strong activism to recognize, to acknowledge what's true, that he could use executive action to move dreamers to the back of the line and to create this DACA program. So he did it. He waited until after the 2012 election. There was a lot of red state senators that said, look, if you do this, I'm going to lose. They lost anyway, right? So right after 2012, he said, okay, you know what? They lost anyway. I'm not going to get any support I'm going to get any cooperation from Congress. I'm going to go ahead and do this, right? And in 2014, he passed the DREAM Act, where he enacted the executive order, the DACA executive order that stands today. He also enacted something called DAPA, which wound up getting stayed, which was an action for the parents of undocumented of dreamers. That wound up not holding up. But yeah, so anyway, so I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you. This is really important political history. So let's move on to some myths and facts about DACA. And this is questions that I'm going to direct to Attorney Torres. Who has DACA helped? Who did DACA not help? How many DACA recipients are there nationwide and also in California? And who are they? How many people were eligible for DACA but never applied? And then lastly, what are some of the reasons for DACA eligible people not applying? Like what are perhaps some fears? And why are some applications rejected?
Good questions, thank you. DACA has directly helped current and past beneficiaries of the program since they enjoy employment authorization and, as Maria mentioned, protection against deportation. Many DACA beneficiaries are gainfully employed and they actively contribute to our economy. So in that sense, DACA indirectly helps their families as well as the United States as a whole. Unfortunately, DACA doesn't do anything to directly help individuals that do not qualify for the program or for whatever reason did not apply to enter into the program, even if maybe they were qualified. In terms of the number of recipients of benefits from the DACA program, as well as the specific statistics of the amount of beneficiaries here in the state of California, it's kind of hard to say with a reasonable degree of certainty because USCIS doesn't really share a whole lot of information about how they develop their statistics, but I can share that with our attendees today. I'd also like for everyone to keep in mind that the numbers may not be accurate because of beneficiaries that may have dropped out of the program, either because maybe they have thankfully achieved lawful permanent resident status by an alternative immigration method, or maybe they've fallen out of the system and haven't been able to renew their existing benefits for any number of reasons, such as maybe inability to pay the filing fee or other issues that may have disqualified them from re-entering into the program. So with that in mind, USCIS, which is U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, that's the federal agency that's in charge of making decisions about DACA applications, among other things. They do other things, but thinking about them as that agency and the holder of the statistics, they say that as of March 31st, 2020, there are approximately 643,000-ish beneficiaries throughout the United States. There's approximately 183,000 of those beneficiaries living in California. In terms of who they are and where they come from, they tend to skew in the age demographic of young adult to minors approaching 18 years of age, based on the restrictions of the dates in which the individuals needed to enter the United States and their age requirements when the program passed, the details that Amina had reviewed earlier. The unifying characteristic among them is age. They tend to be young adults. In terms of where they come from all over the world. The statistics from USCIS show that DACA beneficiaries come from over 200 countries. And so many people have the assumption that the DACA beneficiaries are mainly either from Mexico or Central or South America. That's actually not true. There's a large portion that come from those countries, but there is representation of DACA beneficiaries from all over the world. In terms of how many people are or were eligible for the program but never applied, really hard to say. I don't know. I would estimate probably in the tens of thousands. For every 10 or 15 applicants that I speak to, there are probably maybe 2 or 3 that are prospective applicants, people that for all intents and purposes qualified, but haven't been able to enter into the program for any number of different reasons. So again, I don't know for sure, but I'd estimate in the tens of thousands of people that are eligible for the program, but have never applied. Some of the reasons that people have not applied, Maria touched on this as an existing beneficiary. Sometimes it has to do with the fear of sharing their personal information with an immigration system that is becoming increasingly hostile. So that's a large factor in a lot of cases that I review in terms of the decision-making process for not having applied. Another deciding factor usually turns around the economics of filing the application. The filing fee is $495, and sometimes that's really difficult for an applicant to gather and put together in a lump sum payment. So sometimes that's a problem. And that's not considering any tangential fees, you know, the mailing, the issuance of a cashier's check to cover the filing fee, attorney's fees, or any other kinds of fees associated with the filing of their application. So sometimes economics do take a strong center point in the decision-making process. In terms of rejections and why applications are denied, it sort of spans the gamut of reasons. Sometimes it's as simple as the application not being complete, and so then it's rejected by USCIS for failure to provide the complete application packet, or maybe there's missing supporting documents that are important. Denials happen for a variety of different issues, but mainly the denials center around issues of criminal history. So if for whatever reason, maybe the applicant had 2 or 3 successful DACA applications and then decides that maybe they don't want to apply, or they're you know, concerned about applying, they decide to file, they file their application, and their hesitation came from a new incident of criminal history, maybe a DUI or some other serious crime, then those applications would likely be denied. So I hope I answered all your questions. If I missed anything, let me know.
Oh, I think you covered it all. So this next question is for Marlene. Marlene, 3 years ago, what was the impact when Trump moved to end DACA in 2017? And what was the response from your organization there in Santa Barbara?
Well, back in 2017, Jeff Sessions, the Trump Attorney General, received a letter from several state attorney generals saying that the Fifth Court decision against DAPA applied equally to DACA, and that they would amend their DAPA complaint to include the DAPA unless the DHS rescinded DACA by September 5th of 2017. They sent a letter to DHS director advising her to re-sign the DACA. This was done on September 5th, and all applications sent during the next 30 days would be honored, but therefore no initial or renewal applications would be accepted. This froze DACA until the following January, when the first of several decisions enjoined enforcement of the cancellation. Once decision only resorted DACA renewals or reapplications by those who previously had DACA but had failed to renew. This still remains the policy after the Supreme Court decision, even though it seems to roll the situation back to September 5th of 2017. And here at Importa, it was still the same limbo like we're in now, because we had everyone calling us, asking us if they can apply or if they can renew. So we were pretty much just doing what we're all doing now. Yeah, it was pretty insane.
Maria, did you want to add to that, Maria? That, I mean, when you heard the news that Trump was moving to end DACA, what came over you? What was your reaction?
Yeah, so in 2017, I was a junior in college, and I remember that day, till this day. It was very traumatic. I remember I got back to my dorm from class, and I just literally didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to go back to class. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just wanted to be left alone, because I just wanted to deal with my own feelings and, you know, just try to process everything as best as I could, because at that point I thought everything was over. Like, you know, my word, like, I don't know, my worst fear came, I felt like my worst fear came reality. I thought, oh my God, like, what does this mean? Does this mean that ICE is gonna come pick me up and all of us? And it was very traumatic. It took me a long time until this day. You know, it's been very traumatic, and I'm still trying to deal with everything as best as I can, but that day was just very traumatic.
Yeah, I had students in tears in my office, so I can certainly see how students can be very discouraged to continue. So Amina, this question is for you. What led to the issue of Trump's order to end DACA coming before the Supreme Court?
So everyone was shocked with the proclamation. So many organizations and states sued Trump on various grounds to stop him from revoking the whole DACA policy. The main argument was that it was the way the administration revoked the DACA policy was unconstitutional. Eventually, 3 cases were consolidated in the Supreme Court ruling. The 3 cases that were consolidated came from DC, California, and New York.
Yeah. And so, can you remind us of what did the court exactly decide? You mentioned briefly in your introduction, so it's 5-4, right? And
yeah, so on June 8th, or 18th, the Supreme Court agreed with the DACA recipients. The decision.
you got muted there.
Okay, yeah, I just forgot. So I was saying that on June 8th, the Supreme Court agreed with DACA recipients. The decision did not rule that the administration couldn't repeal DACA. It merely ruled that the way it repealed it was unconstitutional because the government did not provide a reason to repeal DACA, and therefore their action was arbitrary and capricious. And that's a legal term found in case law. In general, a decision that is arbitrary and capricious means that there was an absence of a rational connection between the facts found and the choices made, or the action was not based on consideration of relevant factors. So in this case, there were overwhelming evidence of how ending the program would affect so many people, and the government just thought they could get rid of it for no reason. And another important point to note is that Justice Sotomayor concurred in her decision. So that means that she agreed with the majority, but she also encouraged the plaintiffs to develop the discriminatory animus argument. And what she is suggesting is that the Trump administration may have had a discriminatory motive in ending DACA. And you can easily see and find discriminatory motives in his tweets and his speeches at the rally to support this line of argument.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. And this continues. Today's NPR story is that Trump is still rejecting new applicants. So we'll get to that. But I wanted to direct this next question to Attorney Torres. After the Supreme Court decision, Deputy Director of the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the agency responsible for processing DACA applications, issued a statement declaring that, quote, today's court opinion has no basis in law and merely delays the president's lawful ability to end the illegal Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals amnesty program, unquote. Does the aggressive hostility towards DACA from the agency responsible for processing DACA applications mean that people should not submit DACA renewals or new applications because of the risk they will not comply with the Supreme Court ruling?
It's a really good question. And I think fundamental to any answer about the ability of someone to file any sort of application within the current immigration system should be under the guidance of a licensed attorney or accredited representative who can help that person fully evaluate the facts and circumstances of their particular case, both weighing the positive benefits that they may receive if they're granted the benefit that they seek, and the prospective risks associated with filing their application. But in general, you're right in that the immigration system has become increasingly hostile at all levels, from the administrative agency of USCIS up all the way through to ICE and DHS overall. Professor Marichal touched on this briefly with regard to his mention of President Obama's executive action to use DACA to force immigration to consider that beneficiaries of the program would be non-priority for prosecutorial action. What that means in non-legal talk is that the DACA beneficiaries are, for the most part, individuals who are young students and who pose no threat to the safety or security of the United States, and who are here to simply work and study and support their families. So, but then we have juxtaposed Mr. Trump issuing an executive order in 2017, early 2017, which marked sort of the beginnings of this increasingly hostile system. And the executive action essentially wiped out any sort of tiered system under which a immigration officer could decide between two different cases of prosecution possibility. What I mean by that is, if you think about an example of a police officer has inherent prosecutorial discretion to decide which kind of cases they would like to pursue and which kinds of cases they would like to disregard for right now because they're not as important or pose as much threat to the general safety and welfare of the community. So in the example of a police officer, you might have someone who's maybe jaywalking across the street, dangerous, poses a threat, illegal, and so the officer has to decide, am I going to spend my time investigating this particular case or prosecuting this case, or am I going to go after an armed robbery that's happening down the street? In all circumstances, the officer would probably make the decision that they're going to go after the situation and that poses more threat to the overall community. So if we jump back into the immigration system example, we previously had a tiered system of prosecutorial discretion, which is that individuals that may have committed serious crimes in the United States were deemed to pose serious threats to the general safety and welfare of the United States overall. So terrorists, individuals who have committed serious crimes, murder, manslaughter, things like that. Those were sort of top tier priority. And then all the way down at the bottom, and eventually falling off the list, were those that posed no threat, didn't have any criminal history in the United States, no negative contact with immigration authorities, and whose only real issue is that they're present in the United States without permission. So Mr. Trump's action in 2017 basically wiped all that out and forced the immigration system to go after anyone who's here without permission and no other issues, and a terrorist. He didn't make any distinguishing, he didn't distinguish between either one of those two categories. So the immigration system ramped up all of its prosecution against all of the cases overall. USCIS is no different within this environment. They are the administrative agency operating under the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, and they are they're doing a lot of things that make it very difficult for individuals to achieve lawful status and to receive the benefits that they're legally eligible to receive. So given those facts, an individual that may be considering applying for the program should really consider all of this very seriously, because although they may be legally eligible, maybe they meet all of the requirements that Amina reviewed, they have no disqualifying negative equities, and for all intents and purposes, there should be no problem in approving their prospective application given the U.S. Supreme Court's decision. They still may decide that all of those positive things may not mean that they want to actually file their application because of the prospective danger of sharing their information with the system that does not tend to treat people as equitably as they deserve. So it's a real concern. It's something that each individual potential applicant should review with their attorney or with their accredited representative that's helping them through their review of their case and their process, and weigh kind of what is in the best interest of that particular case. And we should mention Mr. Trump's decision to interview with Telemundo a few days ago and make a statement about executive order, some sort of prospective executive order that he wants to publish in the next few weeks. He mentions that possibility that a pathway to citizenship for DACA is going to be in that executive order. So it's a confusing time. We don't quite really know what to do with regard to kind of squaring those two together. You know, we have the immigration system on the one hand, and then Mr. Trump doing all sorts of different things.
Yeah, no, it's very confusing. And I think even the application process is very confusing. I know we've already have some questions regarding the process. And so I want to bring in Marlene here to speak to, you know, how does someone apply for DACA? How can people find a qualified legal advisor? How much is the application fee? I think you can remind us of that. And are there sources for those that need financial help with that fee? And how to avoid predators who claim to be legal advisors who are not qualified?
Yeah, of course. So how does someone apply for DACA? There is a few forms that must be completed. There's the G1145, the I-765, the Deferred Action Form I-821D. That must all be completed, as well as your work authorization, Social Security, California identification, passport pictures, plus the personal check, money order, cashier check of $495, which is the governmental fee. All that gets submitted to USCIS. Now, how long does it take? It really varies. Here at Importa, sometimes we see some cases coming in some sooner than others, sometimes within 3 weeks, especially now since they are using their previous biometrics. So everything is much faster. And now that I was talking about the application fee, are there sources of financial assistance? So Importa, we get funded through the state. So a lot of people came to us because we were paying the $495 governmental fee. We don't charge for our service, so it was heck of a deal. Everything completely free, our service with a G28 legal representation, plus we were paying the $495. Now that funding comes and goes. So currently we don't have funding anymore, but people can also always reach out to CDSS to see what other organizations get funded through California, through the state of California, and see if they still have funding. Also community colleges. Here in Santa Barbara, I do know there's some colleges that do offer some funding. So it's always great to reach out to the Dream Center if there's a Dream Center at your community college. How can people find a qualified legal advisor? Justice.gov, they have a recognized organization list with all the accredited representatives. That's always a good thing to do. And then also, we always recommend people coming to a nonprofit organization and then sending them out to attorneys who specialize in immigration, because it's also good to know that people are going to the correct attorneys who have expertise in that area. And then how to avoid predators. This is a huge one. We always educate our clients. We always let them know who's an accredited representatives, what they're authorized to do, and who are the immigration attorneys, not notarios, not tax preparers, not immigration consultants, accredited representatives or immigration attorneys. It's really, really important. It's extremely, extremely sad to see how up north here in Santa Maria, Lompoc area, there's a lot of tax preparers, notarios taking advantage of our community. And it's sad to say, but we've had clients come to us and say, hey, so since you guys don't charge for your service, you guys probably have no idea what you guys are doing. It's like, no, we're here to help. This is why we're here. It doesn't mean that whoever charges the more money has more experience. So really, really important. Reach out to nonprofit organizations, reach out to your colleges, make sure that the person you're going to is an accredited representative or is an immigration attorney, because it's insane how much people pay for those services.
Yes, I just want to emphasize that. Avoid notarios, please, because I've had some who were essentially, you know, ripped off from notarios. So I want to get back to the political implications, and this is for Professor Marichal. You know, the ruling clearly provided a very fragile, right, protection of the program. And we can look to just Trump's tweets, right, on a daily basis. So could you maybe speak to us a little bit about sort of this fragile protection of the program that we're in? And so what do you think is going to be next? He did mention about the merit-based system of immigration bill that Attorney Torres briefly mentioned as well.
It is very difficult to predict what this administration is going to do. We are less than 100 days away from a presidential election. The conventional political scientist in me would say this is a very popular, and this is because of Dreamer. Well, two things, because of the activism of Dreamers and the behavior of Dreamers themselves. The DREAM Act and DACA is a remarkably popular program. I've seen polling that shows that support is as high as 90% among the American public. Probably the reality is more like 75, 80%, and that's even a majority of Republican support and having a permanent path to citizenship. The problem, politically speaking, is that it's become like everything else. Everything is political. Your cup out, you're right, like whatever, Goya beans is political, right? Wearing a mask is political, and so it's become about identity. And so let's say, you know, DACA is supported by 75% of the US population. The 25% that don't support it are very adamant, call talk radio, call their members of Congress, and they get, remember, you know, our system is one in which in order to make legislation happen, you don't just need a majority, you need a supermajority because of the filibuster rule of the Senate. So both times in 2009 and both times in 2007 and in 2010, 2009, you had the immigration reform fall apart because you couldn't get past a 60-vote majority, supermajority in the Senate. So even though most people agree that we should do something about immigration reform, it's that very vocal minority that sees it as an identity issue. They know this is America, and the president is very good at taking all positions at the same time. So he'll say, he'll go to, you know, he'll tell Jose Diaz-Balart de Telemundo, I'm going to have an executive order where I'm going to give the Dreamers a path to citizenship. First of all, he can't do that, right? That's not within his executive authority to do that. And second of all, right after the Supreme Court decision, he said, right, he's going to go back and try to get DACA rescinded. He's going to rescind DACA again. This is the same guy that the State of the Union a couple of days ago or a couple of years ago said, you know, well, Americans are dreamers too, right? The implication being, you know, the dreamers aren't Americans somehow. So, you know, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to know what's going to happen in the next 100 days. I would suspect, you never know, but because the Democratic Party is different now, even when Obama was elected in 2008, it would have been politically difficult within his own party to be completely supportive of a path to citizenship for all, or a DREAM Act. Today's Democratic Party there's almost a unanimous 100% support for a path to citizenship for all undocumented immigrants, or a DREAM Act. And so it's a very different, the activist base is much more part of the center of the Democratic Party. And so I think if Joe Biden became president, that would, he has already said that his first action as president would be immigration reform, right? You could take him for what it's worth, but I think that's probably true given how popular that is now within the Democratic Party. You know, within the Republican Party, you know, it's interesting because the Bush administration tried really hard, I think, to go after Latino voters, because Latino voters have not always been reliably Democratic voters. Now for Obama, they voted 2-1 for Obama. And the Republican Party has kind of shifted in the way that when Trump's first things he said, right, is he came out of the gate very, you know, the people that are coming here, Mexico's not sending their best, right? And so he's kind of shifted the party away from this sense of like, well, we're a party of low taxes and small government, but everybody's included, to kind of playing footsie with identity politics and anti-immigrant politics. And, you know, how that plays out, I mean, I think he's always going to be trying to play both sides, because at the same time, he might want to do that. He might want to say, yeah, we're going to get rid of DACA. But that's not very popular even among the Republican Party. There's a lot of suburban Republicans. There's a lot of Republicans who are undocumented, or who have friends that are undocumented, or who know undocumented people who don't. So it's not an easy dance that he's trying to do. He's trying to kind of get that base that really is anti-immigrant fired up, but at the same time, it's not very popular, and he's going to turn a lot of people off. So he's kind of stuck. But the way to move forward is, if you're undocumented, or if you have friends, or if you care a lot about this issue, is to be calling your member of Congress, to be calling your senator, to be putting the pressure on Democrat or Republican to do something about it in Congress, and to vote for people who will pledge that they're going to make this a top priority issue, and to hold them accountable. I mean, the biggest DACA happened because the ally, right, Obama, the guy that Latinos voted 3-1 for, when he was wavering, activists put their feet to called him the deporter in chief and pressed him and said, you have the authority to do this. You need to do this. And we're not going to take the, oh, I can't, I'm not the Congress for an answer. You're going to have to do this. And so this has been one of the biggest examples of how activism works, how when people mobilize and push, they can get results. And sometimes it's more effective when you push your friends, because your opponent, so even if Biden gets elected, there may still be some activism and some mobilization that has to happen to get the administration to take seriously that, you better act on this, right? If not, we're going to make your life miserable. And, right now the Democrats are relying on a lot of get out the vote efforts in Texas and Arizona to try to flip the electoral college. Electoral college does not favor Democrats. And so they're trying to turn Texas and Georgia and Arizona and places with lots of Latino voters that are not registered to vote. And for not all Latinos, but for most Latinos, this is an important issue. Not all, right? I mean, I'm Cuban American, and I know for sure Latinidad is a dicey thing. But for most Latinos, they know people who are undocumented, they have family that are undocumented, and they will vote on this. But they have to have somebody's got to knock on their door. I know COVID is messing all this up. But
Right.
Someone has to knock on their door with a clipboard and say, hey, are you registered? Will you register? And hey, that almost got Beto O'Rourke to be governor of Texas in 2018. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, even DACA recipients can get proxy voters, right, to be kind of allies and get them out to go and vote. So yeah, and I want to mention before we turn to Q&A that the Coalition for the American Dream now has a lot of business leaders, right, coming out in support of DACA. And so I think it's also, important to note that, DACA is good for business. And we think about the healthcare workers. They're DACA recipients in the front lines. They're essential workers. So I want to turn to the Q&A. And so I want to start first with some of the questions that were already submitted prior to the webinar. And I want to turn to attorney Amina Fields with the first question, because this concerns with advanced parole. Will advanced parole be reinstated? This is a question that also came up right now in the live Q&A. So attorney Fields.
Yeah, I was just in the middle of typing that answer, but then I guess I'll just answer it live. It's more efficient. So first, let me explain what advanced parole is, and then I'll answer that question on whether it would, people can apply for it now. Advanced parole is a travel document that would allow the DACA recipients to be able to return from the US because they wouldn't have any other way to return from the US. So many DACA recipients came to the US and have to stay in the US because they don't have any status and they accrued unlawful presence. And if they accrued a certain amount of unlawful presence, they could trigger a bar against them if they depart the country. So what I mean by a bar is that if they trigger these bars, they would not be able to return back to the country for 3 or 10 years. So this prevented them, DACA recipients, from visiting family members or going abroad for emergency reasons or for temporary job opportunities. And what this did was prevent the bar from being triggered when they left the country. Another benefit of advanced parole was that it was kind of like a loophole to allow them to, when they return, they would be eligible to adjust status if they had a qualifying relative. So many, so DACA recipients would use it for emergency travel, or also use it so that they can be eligible to adjust when they return without having to go through consular processing and a waiver application for their unlawful presence. So the final question would be related to this, is that will they be able to apply for it now? Since the Trump administration ended advanced parole applications for DACA. And the answer is that I don't know, nobody knows right now. It's based on the Supreme Court decision, it's possible that advanced parole may be allowed again. However, the details of this possibility is not clear because of, since USCIS hasn't provide any guidance just to even accept initial DACA application. And also there is the potential impact of the COVID-19 pandemic that may limit the ability to travel. So I would check with your legal service provider for more information because this could change on a daily, weekly, monthly basis.
Yes, thank you. That was really helpful. So I have another question that was submitted earlier, and this I'm going to turn to Rafael. Does the current administration plan to get rid of the pardon that keeps you from being barred from the U.S. for 10 years?
Amina touched on this briefly with regard to, I'm assuming that the pardon that the person is referring to is the provisional and lawful presence waiver that Amina reviewed. And so we don't really know if the Trump administration is going to cancel any benefits, right? Again, nobody really knows. Should they do that, then either applicants already within the program should speak immediately with their attorney or the representative that's helping them through the process, either an accredited rep or a licensed attorney, and review other possibilities if their current trajectory looks like it may not work.
Yeah, yeah. So another question that was submitted was, will the Trump administration be giving DACA recipients a path to citizenship? I think this was kind of addressed earlier. If any of the panelists want to chime in to further elaborate on that, or maybe we can move on to the next question. Any takers? Amina? You're muted.
Keep doing it. Maybe I'll learn by the end of this webinar. Can you repeat that question?
Will Trump be giving DACA recipients a path to citizenship?
Okay. Well, that's kind of bizarre too, because he's the one that was trying to revoke it in the first place. So I'm not a political analysis, but it seems like he's is stuck in the middle of trying to please his core voters that are against immigration and immigrants and xenophobia and anything that would benefit immigrants. But then again, he, I think he would need the Hispanic vote to win, and the majority of the Hispanic community support DACA. And also, I think DACA was supported across the board in both parties. So I don't know whether he would support a pathway to citizenship. But the question is whether he can create an executive order to give DACA a pathway to citizenship. The answer to that is no, because he doesn't have that authority under the executive branch. That authority falls within the Congress to create immigration policies. And so Congress has authority to create policies that determine how someone qualifies to become a lawful permanent resident and how someone is qualified to apply for citizenship. And so right now, the requirement is that they have to be a lawful permanent resident before they can apply for citizenship. And Trump can't change those requirements. He can only enforce that law.
Yeah, thank you. So this next question is a live question. I'm going to turn to the live questions. Anybody can answer this. So this is an important question. What about undocumented students who aren't eligible for DACA? Undocumented students studying at schools or going to university. What do you think with their situation? What can they do?
I'm happy to answer.
Sure.
The best thing that someone in that situation can do is speak with a licensed attorney, experienced in immigration law, and or an accredited representative working with a nonprofit. That's probably the best thing that they can do. The evaluation of an individual case requires time and someone that is really detail-oriented about doing what they can to fully flesh out options that might be available. The immigration system is super complicated, and I wouldn't recommend that someone make this decision on their own without appropriate guidance.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a really good advice. So now I want to turn to some live questions in Spanish. So we have a lot of attendees asking questions in Spanish. So one from Marina, she's asking, ¿las personas que no pudieron aplicar primero lo pueden hacer ahora? So for those that couldn't apply initially, could they now apply?
As best as we understand it, yes, according to the Supreme Court decision, but it appears that USCIS is rejecting the applications, and we're also in a waiting period for a formal order to be issued by the Supreme Court. So for now, it's probably best to hold until there's further information for them to be able to make that decision to apply.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and then if I can just add something real quick, we always say just prepare yourself, collect everything you need to put together, especially now with this pandemic. We need transcripts. You need to show proof since 2007 to present time, so why not work on it now, get everything ready, and if we get the green light, you're ready to go.
Yep, Marlene's right. But the best, if you can begin gathering that information rather than to waste that time later, that's a great great piece of advice.
Yes. And remember, we're going to be sending you all the contact information for all these organizations, so you can contact them with any more questions. I have another question in Spanish. Mi hijo nació en México en el 2003 y llegó a los Estados Unidos de 11 meses de edad. ¿Él puede calificar? So my son was born in Mexico in 2003, and he arrived in the U.S. at 11 months old. Does he qualify?
Unfortunately, we don't have enough information to be able to answer that question. There are a variety of different factors and qualifying pieces of information that we would need in order to be able to answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest that if that person would like a more detailed answer, they can reach out to any of the organizations that are participating in our webinar, and I'm sure we'll be very happy to help.
And so this is another question in Spanish from Maribel. ¿A qué dirección se debe enviar las preguntas? So asking about where they should direct it. Y si pueden llenar las formas uno mismo o si es recomendable hacerlo a través de organizaciones o abogado privado o notario. There's a notario question again.
Yeah. Well, we've had in the past DACA recipients who do it on their own, and they've always submitted their application as their own. So go ahead. If you've done it in the past and you have copies of your applications, why not? If you can save yourself that fee, great. But if you work with an attorney or an accredited representative, then that would be great because there is legal representation. But I encourage those who renew their DACA on their own, go ahead.
My only, if I can add to Marlene's answer.
Yes, please.
My only caution would be that if there are any changed circumstances between the last application that you filed and the new one, you really probably should speak to somebody that can help you through that process. You know, a licensed attorney or an accredited rep. But in general, that's good advice. If you've not had any changed circumstances, your application is the same that you've submitted all through this time, and you're just simply submitting a renewal, then I agree.
And we just got another new question. Mi hija es DACA inicial, no es renovación. So my daughter, right,
Wants to apply for initial.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Rafael answered that. So we're still in that, limbo, who knows? But for those who have DACA, renew. For those initial, get your documents together, prepare everything. Don't waste time. But as of now,
That's right. And keep posting your questions on Q&A. I think we've got to most of them, but if you have other questions, I'm looking at the live Q&A, so please post them there. Anything else, any of the panelists want to share or something you forgot to mention? We have a few more minutes. We have about 5 more minutes before we close out while we wait for additional questions.
I would say I really encourage everyone, don't be afraid, reach out to one of us. We're here to help. Importa, our services are free, so why not ask your questions and get the correct answer? There's a lot of people that sometimes say, no, they're going to charge me, or whatever it is. Let's be real. Let's listen to the correct answers and let's know what your options are. We're here to help.
Yeah. So we got a quick question from Ivan. If a person entered the U.S. in 2008, are they ineligible for DACA? I know the cutoff was 2007.
The requirement was that they had to be physically present, but in 2007 continuously. But I would, again, reiterate what my other panelists has said, is to reach out to our organizations for a consultation we offer for free, and we have licensed attorneys as well as DOJ accredited representatives that could assess any other possible eligibility for immigration benefits, so that at least you know ahead of time what you can and can't apply for right now, and what are future applications that you require for if you later on meet those requirements.
Thank you. Anybody else want to add to that? Again, we're going to be sending out all the information, directory of accredited organizations. So I know some of you were asking if we'll be posting accredited organizations, and we will be posting and sending out the directory. So make sure if you sign on to the webinar, you will be receiving an email as a reminder. I have another quick question from Liza. If someone arrived at age 15, for example, and did not attend school, can you recommend evidence that they can submit if they do not have a school record or any school record?
Can you please repeat the question? I heard that the portion about the additional documents that they might be able to submit in addition to or in substitution of school records?
Yeah, so if they
Okay.
Yeah, if they didn't attend school, can you recommend evidence that they can submit if they didn't have any school records?
Sure. Yeah, there's all sorts of things. Primary forms of evidence that that person can provide may include medical records. So if they entered the United States at a young age, so I've got 3 young kids that go through all sorts of series of vaccinations. So you may have a vaccination record showing that you were present in the United States and receiving medical attention. Dentist records, little kids have dentist appointments and things, so dental records may help. Other things that we can include are written declarations from individuals that personally know that the person was present in the United States from X time to Y time. That's more secondary form of evidence. That's not something that immigration will give a whole lot of weight to. Tax forms, other financial records are powerful pieces of evidence. So if the individual's parents maybe included them as dependents on their tax returns, that would be helpful. I tend to do what I can to be as creative as possible with any kind of DACA application. We want to include as much as we can without being so thorough that immigration is kind of thrown off and unable to digest a super thick packet. But I hope that gives them some ideas.
Thank you. Amina?
Yeah, I was just wanted to clarify the question too, because I thought the attendee is under assumption that they have to provide evidence that they didn't attend school, and that's not a requirement. If you didn't attend school, it's not a requirement to prove that you didn't attend. So Rafael was just offering the reason why you would want to offer evidence that you are attending school is to show that you were physically present during that time frame or you reach a certain age. So in the alternative, Rafael provided great examples of alternative evidence if you don't have the school records.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And Mustafa,
sorry if that was confusing.
Yes, and Mustafa had one question for you, Amina. Can you talk about your immigration event on the 29th real quickly?
Yes. So our office provides a full service of immigration representation and legal services. And one of those services include naturalization, and we offer naturalization services for free. And so on the end of the month, we will be doing a webinar on how to become a U.S. citizen. And then if person, and the webinar is free, and we will also answer live questions at the event. And the link to that event is on our website at the CARE Los Angeles website. And if after you attend the webinar and you think that you're eligible, you can contact us to schedule an appointment so that we can prepare your naturalization application. We can do it all over the phone and do it remotely and safely. So I encourage you to, even if you're not eligible now, I encourage you to attend, because maybe you'll be eligible in the future, or maybe you have friends or family that could be eligible. It's really important to naturalize, because elections are coming up, and you know how important elections are to the DACA community.
Yeah, thank you. And so it's at 7:30. I don't want to keep you all. You all have things to do. So, but I do want to get all the panelists maybe to share one final closing statement about what we can do to advocate for DACA, to protect our DACA recipients. And so I want to start with Maria, who is a DACA recipient. Maybe she could start.
Thank you. So I think that, you know, I mentioned in the beginning, I think it's really important to mobilize our own communities, if they have the privilege to vote, to go out there and vote in November, because voting will make the difference whether, you know, our current president gets reelected or we get a new president. And also it can make a difference of whether Congress will act to enact immigration reform, which is, you know, needed so much right now, especially in our current political times. And we also need to, as constituents, it is our responsibility to hold those in political office accountable for what we believe and support. Because after all, they're the ones who are representing us here in our state capital and also in our country's capital.
Thank you. Thank you. Marlene, do you want to go next?
Yeah, of course, vote and encourage everyone who's a permanent resident to become U.S. citizens. There's so many options. There's fee waivers available. Well, you'll get your $725 waived. Most of our clients qualify. I know people can become U.S. citizens, and I finally encouraged my dad to become a U.S. citizen after so many years. It's not scary. It's just a matter of sitting down with them, practicing their civic, their questions, everything. There's even people who qualify to do it in Spanish or in their native language. So vote. I cannot get tired of saying, encourage everyone out there who can become U.S. citizens, who can naturalize. There's so go out there and vote.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Turn to the professor to give us some closing statements.
I just want to reiterate what Marlene just said. Vote, vote, vote. Really, yeah. I mean, like I said before, I think that this current Democratic Party is different. There is a divide where there wasn't 20 years ago on the issue of immigration. I mean, it's like I said, DACA is generally popular. Immigration in general, there still is a pretty significant divide. And if you're somebody who wants a path to citizenship, right now, the Democratic Party is the one who's offering that. So.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. So let's finish with our two attorneys, starting with Attorney Fields.
Yes, I can't say enough how important it is to vote. So if you want to support the DACA community, vote for candidates that support policies and laws that will provide them a pathway to citizenship. And also the information that you learn here, tell your communities, tell your friends and family about it, tell your friends and family about the organizations that we work for that help the DACA community, and tell them that if they have a question or they need help with an application, call us.
Attorney Torres?
All admirable sentiments throughout the panel. I would just end with vote. Vote, and make sure that your friends and family vote. I know that I'm after my 2 younger brothers. They usually don't vote, and I am after them and pressuring them to make sure that they go and vote. So if we all do that, we encourage 2, 3 people, that multiplies our voice. So get out and vote.
Yes. And so you heard it from all the panelists. Get out and vote. So I want to close out. I want to give a big thanks to Willie Bluka, who is behind the scenes, made this happen. So thank you, Willie, for all your hard work with Buen Vecino. I also like to thank all the panelists. Thank you. You've all shared incredible information, very valuable and very important advice and recommendations. So please, I want to also thank the sponsors who made this happen, the tech support team, Brian and others, and all the attendees. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a great evening. Remember, vote, 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 vote. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jose. Good moderating. Everybody. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good luck, Maria. Good luck.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hey, Marlene, you gotta run. Gotta run for office.
What was that?
Gotta run for office, Marlene. You can be a great politician.
We got to do what we can, right? I mean,
You gotta run for
got to
office.
do it.
Right.
Bye, guys.
Great job. Good to meet you all. Rafael, Amina, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Good night, for the